What happens when Hollywood royalty comes face-to-face with British television royalty, and their interaction sparks one of the most talked-about talk show moments in recent memory? In just 37 seconds, a single remark about authenticity would turn an otherwise standard celebrity interview into a career-defining flashpoint that left viewers stunned and industry teams rushing to contain the fallout. Before we break down this unexpected exchange that caught everyone off guard, make sure to subscribe and share your thoughts and comments. You will definitely want to weigh in on what may have happened behind the scenes. Picture the scene. The famous red chair rotates on the Graham Norton show, that familiar Friday night program where stars gather to laugh, tell stories, and promote their latest work in the most relaxed environment on TV. Graham Norton, known for his sharp wit and easy charm, has earned his reputation by putting even the most guarded celebrities at ease. His genuine curiosity and warm laughter have produced countless unforgettable moments over the years, but on this night, something felt different the moment the cameras started rolling. The energy in the studio carried a quiet tension, like a storm waiting to break. Subtle, but unmistakable, Meghan Markle entered the set with the assurance of someone used to being at the center of attention. Impeccably dressed and wearing a polished smile, she took her seat in the iconic red chair with the grace of someone who'd mastered every room she'd ever entered. The audience welcomed her with the usual polite applause as Graham prepared to begin. Well, Graham said with his signature grin. We have royalty in the house tonight, don't we? How lovely to have you here. Meghan's smile widened, though there was a measured quality to it, an impression that she was already several steps ahead in a game Graham hadn't realized he was part of. Thank you so much for having me, Graham. I've been excited about this for weeks. Your show is such an institution, she replied. The compliment flowed smoothly, but experienced viewers might have caught the subtle emphasis in her delivery, the sense of someone performing even while seeming at ease. Graham, always composed, shifted into his usual blend of light questioning and playful conversation. He asked about her current projects, her move from acting into advocacy, the standard interview topics that should have been safe territory for everyone. So, tell us about this new documentary you're producing, Graham said, leaning forward with interest. It sounds fascinating. It really is, Meghan answered, her voice taking on the cadence of a well-prepared response. You know, Graham, what people often don't realize is how important it is to use your platform for good. Not everyone has that chance, and I feel a real responsibility to highlight issues that matter. The audience nodded along approvingly, but Graham's expression shifted ever so slightly. Years of interviewing had honed his instinct to spot when someone was performing rather than simply talking. Absolutely, he replied politely, though I imagine it must be quite a shift from your acting days. A different kind of performance, isn't it? The word performance lingered just a bit too long. Meghan's smile flickered, a brief, subtle change that most viewers would miss, but Graham immediately caught. I wouldn't call it performance, she said, her tone noticeably cooler. What I'm doing now is authentic work. Real work that makes a difference in people's lives. Graham raised an eyebrow, sensing a shift but unsure what exactly caused it. The audience remained unaware they were witnessing the first moments of what would soon become a memorable on-air exchange. Of course, Graham replied smoothly, steering toward safer ground. I didn't mean it that way. It's just interesting how people reinvent themselves, isn't it? I mean, look at me. Started as a comedian, and now I ask celebrities awkward questions for a living. His usual self-deprecating humor, which typically eased any tension, had the opposite effect. Meghan's posture straightened, and her media-trained smile stiffened further. I think there's a difference between reinventing yourself and finally being able to reveal who you truly are, she said, enunciating each word with precision. Some of us have always been genuine. We were simply waiting for the right platform to express that. The atmosphere in the room seemed to cool noticeably. Graham's years of experience kicked in. He could sense the interview drifting into risky territory. Like a skilled captain in rough waters, he attempted to guide the conversation back to safer ground. Well, authenticity is definitely something your supporters admire about you, he offered, trying to establish some common understanding. But Meghan wasn't interested in softening her stance. She had clearly decided this was a moment to make a point, and nothing would deter her. NY fans know I've always been authentic, she said, her voice rising just enough to make the audience shift uneasily in their seats. Unlike some people in this industry who change their face depending on who they're talking to, the remark landed like an explosion in the usually warm environment of the Graham Norton show. Graham's eyebrows lifted, Rarely had he looked so caught off guard by a guest's behavior that I'm sorry. Are you implying that others aren't being genuine? He asked, keeping his voice friendly even as his eyes revealed he was reassessing his entire approach. That I'm not implying anything, Meghan replied with a sharp smile. I'm stating a fact. There are people in this business who say one thing in private and another when the cameras are on. People who act like your friends and then... She let the sentence trail off, but the message lingered heavily in the air like smoke from a growing fire. Over the years, Graham had interviewed countless celebrities, from A-list stars having public meltdowns to politicians caught in scandals, but he'd never faced a moment quite like this. The guest sitting across from him seemed intent on turning his easygoing talk show into a kind of courtroom, with Graham unexpectedly cast as both judge and defendant. Well, Graham said, still maintaining his trademark warmth, but now with a subtle edge, I think most people in television understand that we wear different hats depending on the situation. That isn't being fake. It's simply being professional. Meghan laughed, but it wasn't out of amusement. It was a kind of laugh that made the audience unsure whether to keep clapping or start glancing toward the exits. Professional, she repeated, as though the word left a bad taste. Is that what we're calling it now? Because where I come from, that's called being two-faced. Gasps rippled through the audience. This was no longer light celebrity banter. It felt charged, unpredictable, and potentially explosive. That I in the control room. Graham's production team was likely panicking, but the seasoned host kept his composure with the poise of someone who'd handled many tense moments before. That I think you might be misunderstanding how television works, Graham said calmly, making one more effort to lower the temperature. We're here to have a good time and give the audience something enjoyable, entertaining. Meghan echoed, her voice laced with disdain. Right. So you want me to sit here and pretend everything is perfect while you ask me trivial questions about my favorite color or what I had for breakfast? That I was actually going to ask about your charity work, Graham replied, a slight firmness now detectable in his voice. But if you prefer to talk about breakfast, we can do that too. The audience laughed nervously, unsure whether to enjoy the humor or brace for more tension. Graham's subtle sarcasm was his way of reminding everyone, including his increasingly confrontational guest, that this was meant to be a light show. But Meghan wasn't backing down. She shifted in her seat, her posture becoming noticeably more assertive. You know what, Graham? I think your viewers deserve more than the typical celebrity fluff. They deserve to hear some truth for a change. Truth about what exactly? Graham asked, his patience beginning to show signs of wear. 2 decades of hosting had trained him to deal with tough interviews, but this was quickly escalating beyond difficult, verging on sabotage. Truth about how this industry really operates, Meghan said, her voice rising. Truth about how people like you sit comfortably in your chairs, cracking jokes while real issues get ignored. Truth about how some of us are genuinely trying to make a difference, while others are just cashing their checks and pretending to care. The studio fell silent. Even the camera crew seemed frozen, unsure whether to keep filming or start packing up. Graham Norton, famous for always having a witty response, found himself genuinely lost for words. That I'm sorry, he finally said, his voice quiet but steady. I think you may have misunderstood what this show is. We're not a news program. We're not a political platform. This is entertainment. People tune in on Friday nights to relax and laugh for an hour, to escape their problems for a bit. And that's exactly the issue. Meghan shot back, her composure now slipping. Everyone just wants to laugh and forget while the world is burning. Well, some of us can't forget. Some of us won't forget. Graham inhaled slowly. Anyone who knew him could see he was drawing on every ounce of his professional training to keep calm. Look, he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. If you want to discuss important topics, we absolutely can. But this hostility, this anger, it isn't helping anyone. And it's certainly not helping your cause, whatever that might be that MY cause. Meghan repeated, her voice hitting a sharp pitch that made several audience members wince. My cause is authenticity. My cause is refusing to play these ridiculous games that people like you built. My cause is being real in a world full of fakes. The word fake struck the room like a slap. Graham's eyes narrowed slightly. For the first time during the interview, his trademark smile vanished completely. People like me, he repeated slowly. And what exactly does that mean? Meghan seemed to realize she had crossed a line. But rather than step back, she pushed forward with the intensity of someone convinced they were fighting a just battle. The IT means people who've built careers by being nice to everyone's face while silently judging them. she said. People who pretend to be supportive while secretly waiting for chances to tear others down. People who smile, laugh, act like everything is perfect, but contribute nothing meaningful to the world. The attack was so direct, so personal, that it drained the air from the room. Graham Norton, beloved by millions, respected by peers, known as one of the genuinely kind figures in television, sat in stunned silence that stretched on like an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but firm, each word deliberate. "I think," he began slowly, "you need to take a step back and think about what you're saying. Because right now, you're attacking me, you're attacking this show, and you're attacking the entire team who work incredibly hard to create something that brings joy to millions every week." Meghan opened her mouth to respond, but Graham raised his hand, stopping her. "No," he said, his voice gaining strength. "You've had your say. Now it's my turn." The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The audience sat frozen, watching something that felt historic in both its intensity and discomfort. "I've been doing this job for 20 years, Graham continued, his Irish accent becoming more pronounced as emotion crept in. 20 years of trying to build a space where people can be themselves, where celebrities can show their human side, where audiences can forget their struggles, even briefly." He paused, locking eyes with Meghan, his expression a mix of disbelief and disappointment. "And in all that time, I have never had a guest sit in that chair and attack me personally for simply doing my job." Meghan's expression shifted dramatically during his response. The confident smirk faded, replaced by something that looked alarmingly like realization. She had misjudged the moment, but instead of backing down, she clung to her stance like someone too deep into a losing argument to retreat. "No," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "Your job is to ask softball questions and make everyone feel comfortable so they'll keep coming back to promote their films and books. That's not journalism, Graham. That's just long-form advertising." Graham's expression shifted, from hurt to something resembling pity. He'd seen many celebrities unravel on his show before, but never this publicly or unnecessarily. "You're absolutely right," he said quietly. "This isn't journalism. I've never claimed it was. This is entertainment. It's a space where guests come to have fun, share stories, and connect with audiences in a relaxed environment. And if that's not good enough for you, if it doesn't meet your standards, then maybe you shouldn't have agreed to be here." The words landed like a series of blows. Meghan opened and closed her mouth without sound, like a fish gasping for air. The audience sensed that something in the dynamic had flipped. The interviewer had become the target, and now the hunter was on the defensive. "I came here because I thought you were different," she finally said, but her voice lacked the earlier fire. "I thought you'd actually want to have a real conversation, not just go through the motions. A real conversation." Graham raised his eyebrows, genuine disbelief coloring his voice. "Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm sitting, this feels more like an ambush. You came on my show with an agenda, and that agenda seems to be tearing me down for reasons I genuinely don't understand." Behind the cameras, the production team was frantically signaling, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the situation unfold. Graham noticed their urgent gestures and made a decision that would go down in TV history. "You know what?" he said, rising from his chair for the first time during the interview. "I think we're done here." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. In 2 decades of hosting, Graham Norton had never walked out on a guest. He'd faced intoxicated actors, combative politicians, and temperamental stars, but he had always remained composed and finished the interview. Meghan's eyes widened in shock. Whatever she had expected, this wasn't it. "You're walking out on me," she said, her voice climbing toward a shriek. "You're actually walking out." "No," Graham replied calmly. "You walked out on this interview the moment you turned it into a personal attack. I'm just making it official." He then turned to the audience, his natural showmanship shining through even in this unprecedented moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for what you've just witnessed. This isn't the evening any of us planned. We'll be right back after these messages, and I promise we'll end the show on a better note." The audience broke into spontaneous applause, a sound that seemed to catch even Graham by surprise. Their support was unmistakably with their host. Their reaction felt like a collective rejection of what they had just witnessed. Meghan remained seated in the red chair, stunned, as if she couldn't quite process what were happening. The applause seemed to jolt her back, and she raised her voice over the noise. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," she shouted, her composure completely gone. "This is how it really works. The moment someone speaks the truth, the moment someone refuses to play along, they get silenced, but her words fell flat. The audience had made their choice, and it wasn't her. He paused at the edge of the stage and turned back one last time, his face carrying both sadness and quiet dignity. "The only person who silenced you tonight was yourself," he said calmly. "You had a platform, you had an audience, and you chose to use both to project negativity instead of the positive message you say you stand for. That's not on me. That's not on the industry. That was your decision." With that, he stepped off his own stage, leaving Meghan alone in the iconic red chair. Over the years, it had welcomed thousands of guests, but it had never witnessed a collapse quite like this. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds, catching Meghan's expression as the reality of what had happened settled in. The confident figure who had entered moments earlier now appeared small and disoriented. The once enthusiastic crowd sat in uneasy silence, while production crews scrambled to figure out how to keep the show on track. Security personnel emerged from the wings, not aggressively, but with the composed efficiency of professionals who knew the situation required delicate handling. "We're going to need you to come with us," one of them said softly. His words were barely audible to the audience, but were picked up clearly by the studio microphones. Meghan scanned the studio as if seeing it for the first time, her eyes landing on faces that had shifted from excitement to discomfort. The consequences of her actions, and the connection she had damaged in less than 10 minutes on live television, finally seemed to register. She rose slowly from the red chair, her movements hesitant and unsteady. The woman who had arrived so sure of herself now looked like someone trapped in a situation she could no longer control. "This isn't over," she said quietly, though her voice lacked conviction. It sounded more like a phrase she felt obligated to say than one she genuinely believed. The security team guided her toward the exit with measured professionalism. As she disappeared from view, the studio remained in stunned silence. Many audience members instinctively reached for their phones, aware they had just witnessed a moment that would be replayed and discussed for years. In the control room, producers worked quickly to decide how to fill the remaining airtime. Graham Norton, known for his composure, took a few moments backstage to gather himself after what had been an unexpected and deeply personal confrontation. When the broadcast returned from the commercial break, Graham was back in his chair. His trademark smile had returned, though there was a weight behind it that hadn't been there earlier. He looked directly into the camera, speaking with the honesty and warmth that had earned him his place as a beloved figure on British television. "Well," he said with a wry chuckle, "that's definitely not how I planned to spend my Friday night. Sometimes things don't go according to script, and I think we all learned that together." The audience responded with supportive applause, their loyalty to their host unwavering despite the chaos they had just seen. Somewhere else in the building, Meghan Markle was coming to terms with one of the toughest lessons of her career, that authenticity without compassion is just cruelty, and that burning bridges rarely leads anywhere worthwhile.